And now the music plays. Do, 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 do. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I'm Brad Stokes, and with me today is my co-host
Troy Lightfoot. Hello.
And joining us today is
Chris Stamoulis. Hi there.
Hey Chris. Tell us a little bit about it yourself.
So I've been practicing Agile for a number of years now, and most recently have worked with Mr. Troy and been mentored by him. And I'm actually an Agile coach now for a company, focusing on the central IT organizations. So less about software, more about operational side of the house. And I'm also a high school football coach.
Cool. I was going to ask about the extracurricular activities. Do you see much crossover between those and your actual coaching on site?
I do, especially talking about teams and the interactions and how they work together.
Very cool. Well, today we were going to have a bit of a discussion about what is this team thing anyway. We talk about teams, we talk about cross-functional teams. We want to get to the meat and bones of this. What's a good team? What is a team? How do we help them? Because obviously we're in this to work together, but what is this thing that we're working together for anyway? So what's a team?
Let me just say this. Not only is Chris a high school football coach, but his team won the state championship, correct, at one point?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so he's like
We're about to win it again.
He's like a really, really good football coach. So I'm excited to hear his thoughts on, what makes a high performing team on the football side.
Cool.
Yeah, so back to the question. Okay, so a little background to this podcast. I wanted to know if what people thought was a team is a group of individuals who have their own work and who have their own skill sets, who just happen to sit in meetings together, or is a team something else? And in my opinion, it is something else. It's a group of people who actually work together and do work together and can depend on one another, and who focus on optimizing for the flow of value instead of just their own personal performance. Obviously, you have to perform well yourself, but if you can perform well yourself, but the whole team can suffer. So it's really having that team focus. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's what I think. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, part of a team is the vulnerability piece and holding each other accountable. So not only doing my job, but making sure that we hold each other accountable to our working and our norms. I could even tie that back into football. We refer to it as the strong 11. And what that really means is we're only strong when we unite. So we have one common goal. And maybe that goal is to get a first down or get a touchdown that play. And just having an elite quarterback doesn't really make you an elite team. So if everyone does their piece of the puzzle, helps each other out, and does what they all need to do together, united, then they're successful. So I think that goes both ways. Agile team, football team, same success.
Well, I love that, Chris, actually, because so many teams, quote unquote, they start, let's say you're doing Scrum, for instance, and you start a sprint and they don't have a goal and they just have their own individual work, and they say, okay, every day they meet up for 15 minutes and say, hey, this is what I did yesterday. And then, by the end of the sprint, they try to integrate a lot of their work. And I don't really think that's a team. It's just a bunch of people doing work. And in fact, you might not even, there's no reason to even be a team sometimes in that case. So that's my opinion. Now, when it comes to goals, that's why, to me, it's no coincidence that sprint goals exist for Scrum, right? And then you have if you're doing a scaled way of working, like with something like SAFe, you have your PI objectives, which are goals. And then as a coach, I always encourage teams to think about not only the work, but themselves as a deliverable. So 6 months from now, 9 months from now, a year from now, how do we want to be? How do we want our essentially they're all working on a product, but then themselves are a product that they can enhance and refine, right? So what do we want our skill sets to look like? What do we want our interactions? How are we going to get to high performance, whatever that looks like? So, and setting short-term and long-term goals for that. So to me, that helps really drive retrospectives, makes them a lot more effective. Brad, any thoughts on this topic?
I'm just wondering where we start the baseline is. Like you said, 5 people working together or working on their own stuff, not really communicating with something vaguely out there. Maybe not a team, but I'm just wondering whether a team actually starts with a unified vision, working towards a common goal together. And I think the together part is that really key bit of it. It's not just 5 individuals, it's 5 people pulling in the same direction towards the same thing with a common and shared understanding of a vision is kind of where I really come at it from. Now, I'm okay if they're doing their own specialty. There are certain instances where I have a cross-functional team, but each of the individuals in that team is completely almost siloed, but they're still working together with their skills to get to a bigger goal. So a UI person might be sitting beside somebody that actually does the code side of things, and together they're pulling forward. So I've got all the skills I need. That would be a cross-functional team, and it's ideal if I can do a little bit of everything. But it's really that unity that, for me, defines a team. It's that they are in it together no matter what, and they're pulling towards that thing. How does that resonate?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And tying it back to football, we're successful because we're cross-functional. And if I think in terms of defense, we have the linemen, 4 or 5 different linemen doing their own job. They're all specialized in that job. However, they know each other's job. So if one goes down or if we need to move someone to be more successful, they can do that. And then same thing goes with backups. So someone goes down, we have someone ready to be put in. Maybe they're less of skill, they're not quite up to par with those guys, but they can still do it. And then we have the linebackers that are behind the line. Each one of the linebackers understands the alignment, where the linemen are supposed to be, what their jobs are supposed to be, and they can actually help them if they are lined up wrong, and they can remind them or they can push them over. So I think that the cross-functional piece just ties in so well. They have to be able to do that.
Is cross-functionality an underpinning thing of a functional team? Can you be a team without being cross-functional?
Chris, what do you think?
I'm pondering. So yeah. I think that cross-functional helps, and I think that it's a fantastic goal. And I think that it's really difficult if we have a team that can't be cross-functional to actually call it a team, as opposed to a work group where it's individuals have their own work and they have their own goals that they're shooting towards. So trying to find ways to pair up, trying to find ways to mob, and get that understanding. So to me, it's a way that a team can start with the goal of how do we become cross-functional? How do we get there? How do we work together? So I guess yes, if the team's in its infancy.
Okay. I'm just thinking this through. You've got to start somewhere, and if maybe you don't have the full skill set to be completely cross-functional, you're pulling in other people as you need to. I can see where the cross-functionality isn't 100% mandated, but I can also see that there's an immediate tension that's pulling the team apart because you have those gaps. So if I'm in that situation, I guess I have to start somewhere. Is vision, goals? Do I set goals without a vision? Do I start with a vision? Is it chicken the egg? Where do I actually start to form a team? Say I've got 4 individuals that they may not be fully cross-functional together, 4 individuals together working towards something. How do I start pulling them together to actually start moving them forward to that cross-functionality and indeed anything meaningful?
Okay, well, I have some ideas on that one.
I thought you might.
And this kind of comes back to intrinsic motivation. That's where my thoughts are going right now. So A lot of people think that if you just pay someone a salary, they're going to show up every day to work and do their absolute 100% best for 8 hours a day and leave. And that's the assumption, right? But as we know, that's usually not realistic because human beings aren't robots. Okay. Now, maybe someday we'll all be replaced by robots and then we'll have another conversation. But until then, human beings like to feel motivated at work. Okay. And not only at work, but in life, right? And people do their best work when they're motivated. And in fact, when they're demotivated, they tend to cut corners, they tend to give less effort, right? And you get quality problems, you get less output most likely, and ultimately worse outcomes. So thinking about that, one of the ways that you get people bought in is through vision, right? A shared vision, shared goals. So maybe that's what Chris was talking about when his football team is, shared goals, aligning around them can really help you focus in. And if you know that what you're doing is important and what you're doing and how it's impacting the company, how it's impacting the users that are going to use the product that you're working on, if you can really start to not to only understand the vision, but if you can even have a say in the vision, then that could really be a motivator and kind of like the underlying, like you said, the underpinning of what a team is, So that's my opinion on it. Chris, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so kind of touching on vision. So for me with football, the coaches will get together and we have a vision every year. But then we also bring the players in and we say, okay, let's have a conversation around what's actually motivating, right? So everyone wants to win football games, everyone wants to win state. Um, but is that a great vision? And this year's vision that actually the players came up with that we adopted and are charging towards is I guess I can air quote it, one goal championship. So very simple, pretty motivating if you're a player or a coach because we all want that. And then from there we have almost like sprint goals. So we go into a game and we say, okay, on this game, what we want to do is we want to have no play go more than 20 yards from the opposing team's offense. We don't want to have any turnovers. And maybe those are the two goals that we walk into the game with. So now we have some motivators there that are tangible that these kids can actually do. So we try to motivate per game by goals, by vision. But yeah, I completely agree. It ties in.
I just noticed there's something that you just mentioned there. You said 1 or 2 goals. It's possible to have too many, isn't it?
It certainly is.
So where do you set that line of is useful? Is it 1 or 2? And you just say, look, if I've got 1 or 2, that's probably fairly easy. If I've got more than a handful, I've gone too far. Because I can see this relating to football as well as the workplace. We go into retros, we might generate 50 different actions. But if we try to do 50 different actions, I can't see that ever working.
Right, and it won't. And even in retros,
Nice.
I always tend to say 1 to
Yep.
3, 3 being an absolute maximum, 1 being preferred.
So it works in football, works in the workplace as well.
Right.
So is it really that idea of incremental gains then? Do you always look for those? Is that where you're at, or are some of these things bigger?
So on the team at work or within the football team, it's the same thing. So it's incremental improvement, right? So we're constantly looking on how to improve. On the football field, we record the games. We go back, we watch them as coaches, we watch them as players. We figure out how can we get better. Because playing the same way week after week, we're going to get beat. So we constantly have to improve. There's no stopping point at that. We're always getting better.
So I have some thoughts here, Brad.
Oh, please.
So if some of the Scrum Masters who I've worked with in the past, I like to do this thing when I first start working with them, and I ask them what they think a high performing team looks like. It doesn't even have to be a software team, any team. So if you've been on a high performing football team, like maybe Chris's team, if you have been on a high performing software team or basketball or whatever, right? What does that look like? What are the qualities? And then I kind of get them to think through it, and then we kind of list them out. And I'll give you some examples. So team members trust one another. That would be like a foundation of a high performing team, that there's trust among the team members, right? Everyone is working towards the same goals. they care about their results, and they actually measure themselves on those goals for improvement without having being told by management or outside influence, right? They engage in constructive conflict because like without constructive conflict, it's hard to spur innovation. If that makes any sense. If everyone is just agreeing upon everything, you're never really going to get innovative thought. You're never going to be challenging one another, but constructively. They produce high quality, so you don't have a lot of escape defects. You don't have a lot of, in football terms, you don't have a lot of like blown coverages or things like that, right?
You don't have the Haim Plain fumble.
Yes, right. And then they work so this is mine. They work as a team and not as a group of individuals. So that's what we're talking about right now. So we can dive deeper into that. But the whole team owns the quality and is accountable together. So if there's an escape defect, it's on the team and not one person on that team, right? Leadership is an activity which everyone contributes to when needed. So I think maybe a little bit later, Chris is going to talk about some of the stuff he's doing with his football team and his agile teams when it comes to servant leadership. And that will be an example of that. They hold each other accountable for commitments. They constantly learn together. They have psychological safety, which we know is very important from that. An example is that Google's Project Aristotle, where they surveyed 180 of their teams, and they found that the number one thing that led to a high-performing team was psychological safety, meaning that people roughly spoke up in the same amount of time, meaning they weren't afraid to speak up. So a high-performing team, you have to have that, the ability to not be afraid to say something and look dumb in front of people, or not shout someone down for maybe not knowing something, things like that. And then obviously they're intrinsically motivated, meaning they get up and come to work and they want to do their best work. So relating to a Scrum Master, we usually list a bunch of stuff like this, and they'll come up with some things and I'll add some things. And then I'll say, well, I got good news and bad news. The bad news is this is pretty much your job. So, because the team is not going to do this naturally, right? And that's why the role exists, is to coach the team to be high performing and self-organizing and cross-functional, right? And particularly for a Scrum Master. The good news is it's a really, really hard job. And usually when I tell them that, they realize that like, not only is this going to take, how the hell am I going to get people to trust each other? How am I going to get them to work as a team and not a group of individuals? How am I going to get them to engage in constructive conflict, to all these things? How am I going to get them to be intrinsically motivated? The truth is there's no one answer to any of these questions, but it takes a certain skill set to be able to do all these things. And a lot of people don't even realize it, I think, when they take the job. So backing up, what I tend to do with teams is I'll go in there. So we're making some working agreements, for instance. I'll ask them flat out, like, hey, what do you think a high performing teams looks like? Same question that I would ask a Scrum Master in this example, right? And then we use that as a gauge. Okay, so you're telling me a high performing team is all these things. Okay, so where are we at right now? Like on these things, right? And then how do we have to behave to start working towards these specific things that we see that are definitely lacking, right? And then kind of forming some working agreements around that. So thinking about long-term goals first, putting working agreements in place, and then measuring ourselves every retro, every quarter, et cetera, on these things. Like that's something, that's one way of thinking goals first. So the vision is, this is what a high performing teams looks like. The individual bullet points are kind of individual goals, and then throughout the sprints, we'll measure ourselves on that. So not only we're going to make a good product, obviously, but we're also not going to forget about becoming a high performing team, because the higher performing team we are, the more beneficial we're going to be for the business. And the more return on investment the business is going to get, because we're going to produce higher quality. We're going to be able to achieve better outcomes, and things like that. So it's very important to be a high performing team and not a team that just is very, very produces poor quality, or is very, very lacking in certain skill sets, which you have to have handoffs to other teams, etc. So we want to reduce handoffs. We want to build in quality from the beginning, and not kind of do this thing where Edward Deming talks about burning toast and then scraping it. he has this quote where he says, "Let's make toast the American way. You burn and I'll scrape." So I always use that little thing at work, and I talk about, "Hey, let's not burn the toast." We always think about how we're going to scrape it, right? So different things like not burning the toast, that usually requires multiple eyes on a problem that understand the problem, because with one person, you're bound to make mistakes if you only have one person who can do everything, right? So having multiple really smart individuals, which most people are, let's be honest, on software development teams, they're there for a reason. So let's kind of unlock that ability they have and build in the quality from the beginning. And a last thing I'll say about this, I know I'm going on, but and removing bottlenecks in the team and reducing handoffs, because that's only going to lead us to better quality and faster time to market, right? So that's my spiel on high performing team and what that looks like from my perspective.
Okay. So what you've just painted is, it sounds like the golden fleece of teams, the high performing teams. Most teams that you initially encounter are not high performing. I dare say that there's a good percentage that just aren't. I've got a bit of a saying for me is empathy is always meeting a person where they stand right now. So if we meet a team where they stand right now, and we go back to our original team, they're, say, 5 individuals that have a mix of skills. They've come together and they say, yeah, look, we like this idea of a vision. We agree that this is what we want to do. This is how we can add value. Now, they're not at the point where they have built the trust. They're not at the point where they have got that psychological safety. And I really love the fact that you called out that there can be conflict and it still be safe. It's not just we don't fight. It's, look, we might disagree and we might have conflict, but it is constructive. It is to step us forward, and we understand that. But we haven't hit that point yet. We are right at the beginning of this journey. We are just now understanding where our gaps are. How do I, as, say, a Scrum Master, as an Agile coach, as even a member of the team, help the people around me to say, okay, where the gaps are, so we can start filling those, and where we can start having the just basic trust to begin this journey together.
Okay, so Chris, I'm gonna throw this one to you, and maybe if you can even talk about, I'm just kind of curious about your opinion on constructive conflict on the football team as well as your software team. So,
Yep. So let's talk work first. So I think that our job as Scrum Masters is to really build that environment for the team.
Agreed.
We're mentioning about conflict and criticism and all that good stuff, which is healthy if done properly. But getting there is the trick. So a lot of it is being vulnerable, right? And that's tough. That's a hard thing for people. That's a hard thing for me as a human to stand up in front of people and say, my famous one is, I can't spell, and the team's gonna know it anyway, so might as well just be out there in front of everyone and just kind of own it. And try to really set that example. So I think as a Scrum Master, if you're trying to get the vulnerability, if you're trying to get um, the healthy conflict, it really is being that person and setting that example, making it okay to be out there and be like that.
Can I call something out here as well? Just thinking along what you're saying, and I completely agree with you. I really believe your personal vulnerability, being very strategic and being honest with it, is great. But that doesn't mean playing the fool either, does it?
Right.
Because that's the other one. Some people push too far and they are like, they're self-deprecating to the point that they're actually almost false in their self-deprecation. They might be somewhat accurate about their foilables, but that's not what you mean by being vulnerable.
Exactly.
The vulnerability is actually being genuinely, look, appropriately vulnerable with the people. It's not that I kicked the dog this morning. It's something more than that. How do you see that play out?
So a lot of times I see it with the more senior people. So if they're technologists or architects, they're vulnerable too. They have their problems, right? We all do, and it might just be as much as owning. I'm not familiar with this type of technology. Can anyone on the team pair up with me? And that might be a huge step for them because they're so used to just being the go-to person and the most knowledgeable person. So just getting them to take that step, and like you're saying, the realistic vulnerability, not over the top. And then same thing with football. So I'm thinking in terms of the offense. So we have an offensive line. Their job is to block, make sure nobody comes in and sacks the quarterback, make sure we can get our plays off. Just because you're part of the front five on the line doesn't mean that the person on the other side of you isn't better than you, isn't bigger than you, isn't stronger than you, isn't faster than you, right? So that person, you can be having a handful when you're trying to block that person. Being vulnerable in that situation is tapping your buddy next to you on the line and saying, hey, I can't handle this guy. Can you help me out? Give me a hand. So it's owning that and asking for help, and then getting the help for the better of the team.
That vulnerability too, it seems to evoke a certain amount of humbleness. I'm not God. I have weaknesses. And I actually really like the saying that humbleness is the fortitude of the strong, not the weak. In order to be humble, you need a certain amount of self-courage and strength. Yeah, I mean, if you're weak, you're weak. There's nothing humble about it. You are just genuinely weak. But if you're a strong person that has visible skills that can actually be vulnerable for that moment and be humble for that moment, it's an amazing connection point with people. How do you encourage that other than demonstrating that yourself? Or is that just it? Live it, be real, bring your whole self.
Well, Chris, maybe this would be a good time to talk about your servant leadership and what you're doing with how you try to demonstrate that, and then how you work with how you try to instill that in your team.
Sure. So I got to give a shout out to our head coach. They got this from his college coach, actually. It's called PADS. So PADS. It's kind of a value system that we teach, and it's an acronym. It stands for pride, attitude, desire, and sacrifice. So we teach this to the team. I have it written on my whiteboard at work as a reminder. And to me, it's a core kind of belief system. If you have pride in what you're doing, pride in your team, if your attitude is good and you have the desire to succeed, and you're willing to sacrifice whatever that happens to mean to you, you're starting down that path of servant leadership. So within teams or even coaching, try to teach the characteristics behind that. And really, what I'm kind of thinking here is the football field. When stuff goes sideways, which it does every game, if the team starts turning on each other and starts blaming, this is your fault, you dropped the ball, you did this, you missed this block, it's unhealthy at that point, and then they implode, and it continues going sideways. So it's teaching that kind of servant leadership, and what does that mean to a football player? And I've pondered a lot on this one. I've talked to the team about it, and a lot of it is when stuff's going bad, or even stuff's going good, listening to your team. So hear what they're actually saying, not just I know the answer, I'm going to dictate it to you. That's a big one. So if it's a bad situation in a game, and maybe someone has some information in there, and if you just take a step back and listen, they might be telling you something that's useful. And then empathy is a big one. We touched on that word. Same thing on the football field. So instead of you dropped the ball, you're a horrible player. We all make mistakes. Don't tell me that you had 30 perfect downs if you didn't. So think about being the person that just dropped the ball, and why don't you handle it that way? Thinking about how you would feel if you were in the person's shoes. And really the other one is stewardship. So responsibility, right? So be responsible for what just happened. Be responsible for what's going on with the team. Own it. Commitment to people. So commitment to the team, commitment to the coaches is a big one. And then community building. So what does teamwork look like? How do we relate with each other? And how do we really collaborate and do that kind of stuff? And football field wise, I'm thinking defense. Someone, maybe a linebacker notices that at the snap of the ball, the center lifts his head up. And when he does that, it's a pass play. So now communicate that to the team. Hey, we have a new key. We've got something. The coaches didn't pick this up during the week. I just picked it up now. And now everyone can kind of change. So at that moment, that kind of change is kind of driving innovation. So we have innovation going on right on the fly on the field. Coaches don't even know this stuff is going on. The team's reacting and they're picking up and they're doing this themselves and they're communicating. So I think a lot of that is servant leadership to me.
I'm hearing a few different things there. You're talking about self-awareness. I have an acknowledgement of myself, but you're also talking responsibility as opposed to accountability. I'm responsible for me. I'm accountable to my teammates, but I'm responsible for me. So there's a lot of, we used the word before, ownership. And because you've got that ownership as well as the responsibility as well as the accountability, and together you're pulling it in, and that's really where the team forms. Is that a reasonable surmise?
Awesome.
Because the other thing that this reminds me of, there was a brilliant book I read that was Extreme Leadership, and it was basically this tale of a SEAL team and how they bond together to get to a certain goal. Is each one of them owns what they're trying to do to the nth degree. They have values that underpin that, but they own their piece of the puzzle. But every single one of them is responsible for self and accountable to the team, pulling towards a vision.
All right. So I just wanted to chime in here about servant leadership because I think that's a term that's used, and I don't know if there's a baseline even understanding of what we're talking about. Just like the word self-organization. A lot of times people say, oh, well, the team's self-organizing. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean to just do whatever the hell they want and there's no guidelines, there's no rules, there's nothing? Or, I mean, there has to be some kind of base level understanding when we say, even the word agile, are we meaning the same thing if we say that word? So, okay. So for instance, I have this quote here from Robert Greenleaf, who kind of wrote the book on servant leadership. And the quote is, servant leadership is a philosophy and set of practices that enrich the lives of individuals, builds better organizations, and ultimately creates a more a just and caring world. So that quote, if we're expecting a team to kind of demonstrate these qualities, right? The first thing we have to do is demonstrate them ourselves. Without that, we can't expect anyone to do anything, right? And in fact, they won't even know what it looks like if you aren't behaving in a way as if you're the leader in some case, right? So if you're the scrum master, if you're a coach, if you're a manager or whatever, right? And a side note about leadership, I mean, leadership is an activity. It's not a title. I mean, you can have the title of leader, but not be a leader. And in fact, you can have a team member title and be a leader. So that's what I think we're talking about here is building leadership in as activity across all quote unquote levels. If you have a hierarchical organization, right? So when in this quote, they talk about a set of practices and characteristics. So maybe we can talk about what are some of the characteristics of servant leadership. Like I said, regardless of what your job title is, I have a few that I'm thinking of, and one is someone who listens. So if you're always talking, if you're never listening to the person on your team, it's impossible to be a servant leader, right? Brad, you mentioned empathy. I mean, that's one of the cornerstones of it. Understanding sometimes somebody's going to say something and you totally disagree with them, right? That's going to happen, of course, right? And you might not understand why the hell this person is saying this thing. But if you can try to put yourself in their shoes and see what's the truth to this person? Why are they saying this? There is a reason, right? And even though I don't understand it, I'm going to do my best to put myself in their position, try to see what's the truth behind what they're saying. So that this way, the first thing you have to do is listen, actively listen, and not just, think of your own thoughts. Try to put yourself in their position. And that will help you when it comes to driving to outcomes and that constructive conflict and not fighting and not blaming each other. Even if I disagree with the approach or if I disagree with what you're saying, if I can understand why you're saying it and actually do that, then it'll help us, come to an agreement or come to a decision better. So and then not fight, obviously. I mean, there's a bunch of other characteristics, but what do you guys think characteristics of servant leadership would?
I have seen it reflected really well in a few different fields of life. I've always found that people, and it really speaks to my soul, the whole idea of servant leadership. It's not me pointing at you with a stick saying, go here. It's us pulling to a servant leader brings people along with them and supports the people that are around him. I mean, the true genius of a 10x developer is often they're not the 10x. What they are is they're a 1xer that's really good at making people around them look amazing. And I always find that the true 10xers are the ones that amplify people around them. A servant leader is a person that amplifies the people around them. It's not about them. It's about actually the people around them going forward and providing the support that they need to be at their best and to find the best in them, to look for the best in them at all times. It's not, sorry, this one's really close to the heart, but it's not about saying, oh, you can do this 50% better. It's about to say, sitting them, okay, how can we help you get to that 50% better? I can see it in you. I know it's there. Let's step through this together. It's actually carrying them along on a journey. I love the quote from John Maxwell, leadership is influence, nothing more than nothing less. It's about one life. It's not about roles, position, or title. It's about one life influencing another. And that's kind of the heart of servant leadership. It's about that influence aspect in a positive way, not a pointy stick, but somebody that stands beside and walks with.
And I got to be honest with you, piggybacking on that, Brad, I think that was great what you just said. So that's why I love my job, because I don't view my job as a coach as I just go in there and tell people what to do. That is not what a coach is. And I think that's actually ineffective. Really, it's about helping people achieve their goals and obviously helping the organization be successful, but it's helping the people I'm working with be successful, because ultimately it's going to make the organization successful too, right? So, and it's really about helping them unlock their own potential, and their potential could be far superior to mine at the end of the day, actually. And it's understanding that I'm here to help and I'm here to serve the people, serve the people in the organization I'm working for. So that's what I try to, and I love that, and that's why I think I just naturally really enjoy my job, and I have, sometimes work can be frustrating. Sometimes we can complain about things, but ultimately I would say the reason why I travel 4 days a week and all this is because it kind of goes right in line with my personal vision of how I view the world and the things I enjoy. Right. So, I love this stuff. Not everyone does. I totally understand that. So I'm not naive there. But I do agree with Chris and you, Brad, that a high performing team should exhibit some characteristics of this servant leadership, right? And I will say one other thing is foresight. So a servant leader should have some foresight about, a little bit of, or maybe a lot of forward thinking, right? Thinking about vision and goals like we were talking about, and not just stuck in the moment all the time, and understanding the bigger picture, what we're doing, how is it impacting a bigger picture. Now, this is easy to say, but if let's say you're on a software development team and there is a manager who's like just saying, pushing you to cut corners possibly, or who's only focusing on output and is not thinking of the bigger picture, because they might be now empathizing with them. They might be getting something from their manager who's saying, no, you have to make sure these people are doing this all the time, right? So it's not only, it's really difficult to act in this way if you are being influenced a certain way, right? That's why agile coaching, and if we could pull the word even agile out of it, just coaching in general in an organization, trying to get it to exhibit high performance, it's not just about the team. It's about, you have to work with leadership. You have to at all levels, because you can, even if you say, hey, a lot of times people will complain about middle management. That's a very common complaint. But middle management is not just doing these things on their own. A lot of times they're being judged or graded in a way from their own management, and that drives the behavior, right? So sometimes middle management And now I've worked with some awesome middle management in my life, but I've also worked with some middle management that hasn't been so great. And it's not always their quote unquote fault. Sometimes it's being, like I said, the way that they're being driven, right? So we have to even empathize with them. So it's all levels here is the coaching.
Right, right. And I think the one last piece is awareness. So as a servant leader, we really need to be constantly assessing what the environment is, assessing the reading the team, reading people, we interact with them. Really just, we have sprint planning. Great, people are trying to go through the motions, but taking a step back and just looking to see who's engaged, who looks frustrated, and then working with that person, calling it out, or taking a break if it's needed because people are starting to get drained. So I think it's a lot of constantly being aware of the entire environment as a whole.
So I wouldn't want to leave this conversation, guys, without giving like a practical tip. Okay.
Right.
So I have two of mine that are coming to my mind. There is if you have a team that's new or that's been together for a while, but they don't trust each other, right? Getting to that, what Chris was mentioning earlier, vulnerability based trust, where you don't really trust someone if someone is not vulnerable around you and if they have their guard up all the time, it's really hard to trust them, right? The the first thing you can do is try to facilitate this vulnerability across the team members. Now, there's a balance here. You don't want to be like day one, everyone's super uber vulnerable and crying about personal problems, right? But the simple thing could just be something as simple as an exercise. So, for instance, like Jurgen Apello has this thing called personal maps, which I love, which is basically maybe we can link it in the show notes, which is a practice which you can have people pair up and kind of draw some maps about the person. And then whatever they can't fill in, they kind of interview each other. And then they get up and they read out about the other person. And it will be things like their work life, their personal life, their goals, where they live, their family members, their hobbies, all these types of things. And sometimes I've seen teams that have been together for a while that they had no idea that like this person on the team was into playing guitar, right? And then somebody says, "Oh, I got like 5 guitars," and then they end up like going out to lunch and getting to know each other. When you start to get to know one another past just the actual work, you start to trust them. That's like the first level. And not that you fully trust somebody, but without even a sense of this, who this person is, it's really hard to start trusting them. So that's one thing. Other things like trying to schedule lunches together, or going out to lunch or going out to a happy hour, trying to just get out of talking about only work all the time. Because if you're trying to build that trust up, only talking about work is probably not going to cut it. So building some camaraderie there. And my other tip is when it comes to the cross-functionality piece and the motivation is, I like to do this thing where you kind of ask people, and Andy Clef was a big influence on me with this particular practice. So shout out to Andy Clef a few years ago, maybe, because I was doing something like this before, but not as formalized as he does it. And I really like the way he does it. So I kind of stole that. So the way he does it is he surveys the team members across 3 different levels. So one is technical practices. One is process skills. So that's like your Scrum and XP and Lean stuff, right? And then the other is what people call soft skills, which I don't even like that, but that's what we'll call it for now, right? So you kind of ask people like, hey, what are the skills you have? So do you know Java, REST web services, things like that. Maybe a little bit of CSS. Maybe you've had some experience pair programming, etc. Right? Maybe you're good at public speaking. Maybe there could be a lot of different skills you have, and then kind of serving the team, putting all the skills in an Excel sheet if you want to do it that way. You don't have to, but that's one way you can do it. And then breaking them out by like levels. So you have journeyman, apprentice, journeyman, and master, for example, right? And then you ask the team, okay, so here's all the skills on the team, everyone across process, technical, and soft skills. And where are you at here? Like, are you an apprentice at HTML, CSS? but a master in, REST web services, right? And then you kind of just get them to list that. And then the last question is, well, where do you want to be? So for instance, what do you, out of all these things on the team that are available to you, what are the things that you feel like are important for you to get better at? What would you like to get better at? Now that's putting it on them. So now you're kind of giving them the power and the ownership of their own results, right? And it's not like forcing it on them. And they're going to be motivated because ultimately you're giving them a choice to learn things they want. And then the last question, I said last time. last question is, as a team, yeah, so what are these skills which will be the most important for the 6 to 12 months for our team to get better at to achieve high performance, what we identified as a high performing team, right? So they may come out with like the top 5 skills. So let's say, hey, in order for us to be high performing and not have so many bottlenecks, we need to get better at like, let's say front end, right? Maybe only one person knows front end on this team. So that's going to be really important that like somebody else can also learn front end. Maybe not the whole team, but at least one other person, right? Then we need to get better at, like I said, RESTful web services, different things like that. So, and then as a coach or a scrum master or facilitator, you facilitate those conversations when you do your planning. So sprint planning, okay, here's the stories that are part of the sprint goal. Here's the technologies. Here's the skills that are going to be needed. What's our plan for these next 2 weeks to achieve our longer plan, right? And then we'll address that at the retro. How do we do, right? So that could include things like pairing. That could include things like mob programming, lunch and learns, whatever, right? So it's thinking about that. So that's the practical thing you can do. And I can link that. Andy Clef has an awesome blog post about what I'm talking about, which gives you like the step-by-step of how to do this. So I we'll link that in the show notes as well.
Fantastic. Chris, what would be the 1 or 2 practical tips that you would bring to the table and suggest that people look at when dealing with the team?
So one of my personal favorites, I'll shout out to Lisa Atkins on this one, is constellations. I really like this one, and I guess we can put a link to how to do it. But basically, the thought is the room that we're in, maybe we do it in a retro, is the entire universe. And the middle of the room is the center of the universe, and the walls are the very far away. And then as a facilitator, you would basically just read off a question that's not completely pointed. And depending on how that lands on people, they would go as close to the center of the room as possible if they felt very strongly that statement lands with them perfectly. And if they're far away from it, then they are really against the wall or anywhere in between. And I always start that one with really easy things. And one of my favorite ones is I am a Game of Thrones fan. So we start that, we start getting moving. And then take note on where people are and tell people, look around the room, see where your teammates are. And then get into where we're trying to go and start making the little bit tougher statements. Something along the lines is I thrive in a micromanaged environment, and then see where people land there. And even end it, the last one that I did, I ended it with I feel comfortable in a high conflict situation, or managing a high conflict situation, or de-escalating a high conflict situation. And when I end with that one, I typically will go and talk to the person that's in the center of the room. Not so much on what skills do you use, but more so on what do you feel deep inside. What's the actual feeling that you have when people are arguing and there's all this stuff going on and you feel the need to control it? What is it? Nervous? What is it? And then same thing with the person that's standing against the wall, and just take those steps of seeing where people are on the team, and then hearing, maybe not too many times, but hearing once or twice why people are at extremes and how that actually makes them feel. So it's really just understanding people is a good step too. Good practical tip.
Well, I'll throw my couple in there, and these are fairly practical, I'll admit. I find that for a team, understanding the value they bring is probably one of the most important things that I can do to help them understand that there is value and they have worth. And the easiest way that I've ever found to do this is if they aren't doing reviews, start doing reviews with real people that aren't just the management directly above them, that actually are affected by the product that they are bringing to the table. And that might sound a little bit scary. Get somebody up a couple of rungs up the ladder to actually sit in the room and see what has been done. And when I say see what's been done, I don't mean a showcase where you show your pretty stuff. I mean, bring the real stuff there, bring the work that's complete. And if there wasn't work that's complete, reveal why and really feedback properly to the stakeholders around them. And the returns on that investment are insane, because when you get real people, bring a salesperson into the room that sells your product and find out from them what the customers are saying. And I have seen that just energize an entire team that might have been a little bit down in the dumps, because they suddenly understood that they had real value. And because they understood that they had real value, they started believing it themselves. And I've seen that work more than a few times. The other thing I would say is, if you're not doing reviews, retros, if you're not doing reviews, do reviews. But if you're not doing retrospectives, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing Scrum, if you're doing Kanban and you're not regularly having periods where you are inspecting and adapting, find a space, create a space, put it on a cadence if you have to, and stop and actually provide a space to get real with each other and keep it real. And if you're not there, and I know I'm saying keep it real, oh, that sounds how do I do that? Well, it's going to change. And if you're half decent at a Scrum Master and you want to get better, you're going to figure out how to connect with the people around you. They've been my two little practical tips. Now, I know we're running right up on time. In fact, we're a little bit over Troy's allotted time space. So we might just start to wind it up. Guys, how can people contact you? And if you've got anything coming up, do you want to promote? Now is the time.
You can contact me on Twitter at G4STroy and on the Coalition at coalition.agileuprising.com. Do I have anything to promote? Not really. So nothing extra. I will say this, Brad, you just gave me an idea for a future podcast, and the title might be something like "You're Not Actually Doing Kanban."
Like it.
Oh, I like that. Yes, that is on the list.
Okay, so yes.
Chris.
You can contact me at ccStamoulis@gmail.com.
And if you want to hit me up at Bradley Stokes on LinkedIn. I'm always on the Coalition, and really do enjoy the conversations that happen there, because you get real practitioners talking to each other and solving some real problems that we've all faced out there in the wide blue yonder. I am on Twitter at Brad Stokes, and certainly come and find me, have a chat. I am always good. I'm also going to be at Scrum Australia, which I think is about 2 weeks away. I believe there's still tickets available. So if you want to come and talk to me at that, I'm going to be wandering around. I cannot tell you the color of shirt I'm wearing, because it will depend on what I buy the night before. Anyway, thanks again to our guest, Chris. Thank you, Troy, and to you, our listener. And if you enjoyed the episode, please give us a rating or review, or leave a comment on iTunes, Stitcher, your favorite podcast. It really does help the show. If you want to do one thing to help the show, share the show to someone else, or leave us a review on iTunes. If you'd like to join in the discussion, as mentioned before, you can join us on the coalition.agileuprising.com. And finally, support from listeners like you help us actually cover hosting costs, production costs, and you can see the show notes on details for how you can become a patron. This is the Agile Uprising podcast, signing out.